pretty large panel, so it's going to be a pretty interesting discussion because we've got people from multiple fields over here, and we're talking about the bottom line. So I think everybody is going to be pretty attentive, because at the end of the day, it's all about, is it worth the money when you are implementing AI? Are you making money? Are you saving money? All of that is what we're going to be talking about. Now, we have a very diverse panel over here, and we're talking about from the boardroom to the bottom line. How do you measure ROI when it comes to AI, implementing AI? Now, I think last year when we were talking about AI, it was all about, or maybe 2 years back, it was all about getting into generative AI, using some large language models, all of that. Last year, the buzz has been about agentic AI, and now it's moved beyond the proof of concept. People are now actually implementing AI in certain sections of the workflow. So if I was to start with you, Ankur, what were the challenges that you've seen when it came to actual implementation, from moving beyond the proof of concept?
Great, thank you for that question. So the business that we are in is of being a social enterprise. That is that, the benefit to the end consumer is where the impact lies for us. So, when you think of, there are several challenges when you think of moving from a board to the end beneficiary. The first one of those is, how do you define impact? Often when there is anything new that has buzz, we have the proclivity to start with process indicators, to say that, let's go and develop a tool, let's deploy that tool in our workflows, and then we will measure success as we go along, right? I think that's where the challenge comes in. Then how do you define success when you begin a program? How do you say, is this going to save me money? Am I doing this because this is going to help me make a decision faster? Am I doing this because this is going to bring efficiency within my process? Or am I doing this because this is going to help me make a better decision? And then defining that at the outset is very important, because otherwise what we end up measuring is how many people are querying on a language model, how many people are actively using it, how many people have been trained. All those are fine. Those are though activity or output matrix. And unless we start with the impact, it's very likely that we'll get lost in activity and not reach where we want to reach. And also we wouldn't be able to make the decision on when to kill it. I think that's the other problem that we are likely to face when we move from board to actual implementation, where we don't know when to stop something. So I think those two are very critical parameters from my perspective. I think there are many others that will come. But yeah, just to start the ball with those.
Yeah. Anurag, your perspective on this?
Yeah, definitely. I would want to add a risk management perspective to it, that of course it brings its own set of complexity as far as implementation is concerned. We all are focused about what kind of productivity, what kind of efficiency, and what kind of revenue it brings. But as we see that regulation is also revolving around it, we have to calculate, we have to factor in the liability that these models are raising to us. While we are able to delegate a lot of work, we are still not able to delegate accountability or responsibility. That still reside with individuals, and those individuals, whether they would be the model creator, the people who are prompting those models, that is yet to be decided. So the theme of today's panel discussion is return on investment. So most people would stop at efficiency and productivity. I think we should also factor in a monetary aspect of accountability and legal liability that may arise, given lack of AI focused. While there are governance and guidelines, there are still there's still limited regulations that interact with the AI as we see it and as it's going to be in the future. So we should factor the monetary value as well to reach a more realistic, risk-adjusted ROI rather than pure financial. That would be my take.
Right, and the regulations in fact are just evolving. EU has come up with the regulations. In India we are thinking of regulations now for AI, it has to come out. Praveen, if I was to ask you, where do you stand when it comes to measuring ROI with your AI implementation? I'm sure you're using AI. If you could give me an example of how you're using it and how do you measure the ROI on that?
Yeah, so I think to begin with, I think the point about getting from proof of concept to live, like, I just touch upon a few things which we are experiencing different from what's been already stated. I don't know how many of you have seen this, but we see a notable difference in quality when you move from lab to production. We've seen that in some of the projects we do. So one of our projects had 94% correctness, going to 65% when you move to production. So there are things you discover as you go along. So that's one. I think the latency in LLMs is real, is quite substantial. As you discover when again you're in production, you realize for a lot of specific tasks, consumers are used to, like 100 milliseconds, and then you're seeing that LLMs are not able to do that. And we are actually for some of the tasks we are moving to SLMs. And I think the inference cost, at least from what we've seen, we're a large B2C brand, inference costs are quite substantial. So I think those are some things that are different from what I think the earlier panelists pointed out. I think on ROI, I'd say specific to a question on how do we see. Of course, there is an aspect of cost, and I think we are seeing we are in our organization using Cursor and Claude, and we are seeing about 20% efficiency on the engineering velocity and bandwidth. And I think that is a straight calculation and cost. I think the other ROI calculation you do is what kind of market share you can move, and what kind of revenue, faster to market decision making you can do. And I think we see that in a lot of our examples. If you look at how this comes to life, for example, we are a digital real estate company. Yeah. We recently did something called Project Highlights, and we collected all the, you have all the data around a specific condominium, and then, if you're able to just do the highlights using an AI agent, your click-through rate goes up. In real life, click-through rates going up by 40% is just business, right? So I think there is a cost aspect, and there is, of course, an aspect of introduction of some of this stuff which just helps business both in market share and in revenue. Yeah.
Okay. Rahul, Ankur had mentioned, you should know when to kill it. Now, you have worked with many founders, in the AI space. Have you seen any implementation of AI where you've actually had to step in and say, like, this is when we kill it, it's not working? Because as Praveen also said, it could be, there'd be a time difference from proof of concept time to actual implementation in the way it works.
No, I think what Praveen said about the difference between development and testing and then finally putting it into production is very, very true, very, very real. We see, we invest in very early stage startups which are trying to solve new challenges. These are untested waters, right? You go in there, you take a whole set of data, you build something interesting, it works, the demo works. You go into production, the data is all sorts of crazy, right? Customers can ask anything. So what if you are selling shampoo, he can ask about you selling shoes. You don't know that. That control doesn't exist. So as you move from, and also you must come from, where do organizations today come from? They come from a deterministic world. We want answers in yes and no's. AI doesn't give you that. That certainty doesn't exist in AI. And that creates its own set of challenges and how we measure results, right? So, human drivers also make faults. But if an AI makes a mistake because of which an accident happens, the reaction is very, very different, right? So you have to keep that in mind. Cultural acceptance of AI's mistakes is very different from human error, because we expect humans to make error. But also, I'll just add to something Praveen said about ROI, right? The cost-cutting aspects, I think, is the low-hanging fruit. That is today's, a lot of investment is happening towards that. And that's the easy stuff to do. You just take out cost by automating certain parts which were manual. right? We have enough people. I mean, every organization large enough, you'll see there are people who are opening one system, taking some data from there, and pasting it into another screen on another application. All this doesn't need to happen at all. It's just boring work, just busy work. A lot of this should get automated. But I think you kind of hinted about that, and which excites us more, are the aspects where it fundamentally goes ahead and solves new problems and thus builds new revenues. Let me give you an example. I mean, we stay in a city, in a megapolis, right? We have access to the best healthcare you can think of. Go take something as simple as skin care. You go 200 kilometers from here, you're not going to find a dermatologist. But today's world cares about how you look, right? There's people in every village producing Insta videos, and they want to look their best when they go on video or they're getting married. And how does that get, how do you deliver care at India scale? At 1.5 billion people, how do you deliver that at scale without having millions of new doctors? It's not going to happen. So now, for example, from my portfolio, there's a company called Cureskin. Its entire 90% of its revenue comes from tier 2, tier 3 and below towns and in India, where the AI does all the diagnosis. You can do it sitting at home. You just need a smartphone, which 90% of India today has. And that's the surprising thing. Suddenly, there's a new market which opens up, and there's an underserved community which can be served at really low cost. This is all bottom of the pyramid that we are talking about. On the other hand, I think, opportunity from ROI perspective we see and we invest behind is transforming industries that have lagged behind from a digital transformation itself. And here we are talking about leaps, not just in productivity because of automation, but productivity, like take for example, in software we've always been talking about a concept called shift left, which is the earlier you find a problem, a mistake, an error, the easier, and stitch in time saves 9, that concept. Now take that to construction. Today construction error checking is all done post facto before you hand over to the owner. But by that time, now fixing those same mistakes takes so much longer. So industries like construction, infrastructure, logistics, there's huge amounts of leapfrog opportunity. Much like India moved straight from having no phones to having smartphones. We skipped the entire landline piece, I think that opportunity again is what I think a way to look at AI.
Okay. Well, interesting. I'd like to get Resham's perspective here, because now you're a very different company. You're a very large organization. And again, in your, he works with startups. Well, you are a several decades old company. In such a large organization, how does this measurement of ROI play out?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Cool. So I think every problem that was described on the stage is proudly we have it. Operating in 130 countries with all operations from shipping to trucking to warehousing. We literally have everything that is being called out. The customers, which are very, very complex. The regulatory bodies, which are again, have a mind of their own. The startups, which we are constantly competing with, because every country and every place is trying to do things smarter and faster and better. So I think for us, more than ROI, this is a survival game. We are a 130-year-old company, and if we don't figure this out fairly quickly, then we are against all odds that we just spoke about on the stage. So for us, ROI is, fortunately, it's a very easy calculation. If you get 2% better on your fuel, you're talking about maybe $1 billion of cost savings. So if you think about it from a numbers perspective, every small little saving or every small little change that can be prevented or that can be avoided leads to a very high number of savings from a cost perspective. But then also to the growth point, if you think about it, if you want to operate in such a large environment where you have customers who are, from an onion exporter to a car manufacturer, these are all our customer base. In order for us to get better with our growth, we also need to be addressing all of these at the same time, and all of them want something different. So I think for us, AI, ROI is both on growth and on cost, extremely important, and almost exists. If we don't have that, we will not exist in the next, I won't even say 100, next 10 years. So it's very, very important, and that's how we look at it.
That's a very interesting perspective, to have such a huge behemoth like your company actually being very about competing with startups, because AI can be the great leveler over here and can change things overnight. That's a very interesting perspective. Sachin, you come from an industry now where the use case for AI has been proven in the last 2-3 years, especially when it comes to the consumer-facing side, and things like fraud mitigation, customer service, all of these things now all these things have been taken over by agentic AI in certain pockets in the insurance business. So, what's your perspective on how you calculate ROI in the insurance business?
Well, I think. Am I audible? Okay, I am. See, I think from ROI perspective, when you interact with a BFSI, a service provider that's kind of providing service on the insurance side or on the banking side, clearly the customers are looking at, two KPIs, major KPIs. One is, of course, trust. The second one is empathy. And I think all our financial products, be it insurance, everyone's looking at transparency, more inclusiveness. The insurers want more customer participation. Customers are looking at more transparency. So clearly the bedrock for all and everyone who's operating in the BFSI space is trust and empathy. And I think that's a tricky one for AI to solve yet. Because when it comes to the customers, or when it comes to kind of looking at how the customers want to kind of be dealt with, very frankly, whether it's AI or no AI, they're looking at return on investments for what they're investing with us. But from an insurance company perspective, and the reason why I said trust and empathy is because that's an area of opportunity for people who are creating AIs, and we are heavily users of AI. So there's clearly a differentiation between people who are creating AI versus who are leveraging AI. So if I were to put myself, for a minute into the category of organization that's kind of leveraging or using AI, then what I expect is that I want to pass on the return back to the customers in the form of trust and empathy, and of course, try to give them the return on their investments that they are doing with us. Now, if you look at it from the organization perspective, in any banking or financial sector organization, what are the play areas that we operate at? Of course, we are looking at workflows. How do you kind of simplify your workflows to amplify them? So we do run a very proud campaign within the organization where we're looking at simplify to amplify. Can we simplify using AI? Can we recursively use AI to simplify it for us? So can ROI be simplification for us? And of course, when you try to iterate this further, you really come across simplification as one of the key attributes of using AI. But at the end of the day, there are three important outcomes of simplification, which is time, quality, and cost. And of course, when you look at time, does AI help you take decisions which are faster? If that is yes, then that's an experience back to the customer. Keep trust and empathy in mind that customers don't want to talk to robots still. Customer does want to talk or probably have more human context to every conversation that they would want to have. Second one, of course, is quality. If you kind of lose out on quality, then there's a lot of other players wanting to grab that share of the customer's wallet or mine. For that matter. And of course, cost from a customer's perspective, organization perspective is that are the products now cheaper for the customers? Is it really value for money for the customers? So when we look at defining ROI or looking at the overall performance management framework, if I can use that word from AI perspective, we are clearly looking at trust and empathy as the bedrock. When we look at our workflows, are we making things simplified for our people? Are we making things simplified for future? Is change management going to be easy in future? It is not about what you create today, but how the ROI stacks up over the period of time. And therefore, when I look at ROI, to last point from my side, there are three there are three important phases where the ROI gets tracked. One, of course, is the early stages. And I think most of us, from the usage perspective, are still early users of AI. Then is, of course, the growth phase. Once AI is kind of proven and it's already there and trust and empathy is already there, all the large language models understand human interfaces far, far well. Then you, of course, come into the growth phase and say, how can you expand your distribution? How can you cover more people under the life insurance space? So from an AI perspective, our approach on AI is keeping customer to the center, trying to create products with AI, try to create workflows with AI, try to embed AI into the operating rhythm, but at the same time keep telling the customers that we are there for them when the customers need us. So I think that's how we are solving the equation on AI, and as far as ROI is concerned, from a BFSI space perspective.
Right. So what you're saying is that the trust factor with humans is still, with AI is still not there, and a lot of your customers still want that human connection.
Yes, of course. On the customer service side, people do want to kind of still get more comfort, and I think a lot of comfort gets given when somebody talks to the customer. So I think, yes, on the servicing side, trust and empathy is what AI is probably needing to catch up more on. I would want more, from AI.
So this is interesting. From the whole panel now, I've heard that, ROI is not just monetary. You're looking at it in time saving, you're looking at faster decision making, and as Resham said, like even if that 2% change can come anywhere, it is a saving on different things. But now, if you look at the total cost of AI deployment, now this is a decision that's made in the boardroom, right? How much is it going to cost me? Are we going to be cutting workforce? Are we going to have to reskill a whole bunch of people because AI is coming in a different division to be created, skilling to be done, the software cost, the hardware cost, the retraining costs right across the organization. So when you take all this into consideration, how does the decision to implement AI pan out from the boardroom? Is it like, are you willing to invest now and look for return maybe like 3 years later? What's that kind of time frame that you're looking at? Ankur, your perspective on this?
Okay. So I think just to start us off, of course, it has to be like, there has to be short term and there has to be long term in it, just like any other thing we invest in. We can't be impatient, but we can't forever be patient with it, right? When I meant the point on killing, it's not killing the concept of using AI. It is killing a use case that isn't working, that we got ourselves wrong-footed on. So, there are two things here. First is, how do you identify the trade-offs that you're making in making that decision? And rather than like just going tool by tool or one use case to another use case, how do you approach AI integration as a R&D project across the organization? To say that if I were to take up a new R&D in my organization, I would say, where is my initial hypothesis for what's going to work? Where are my factors that I'm going to weigh across every single department? Because otherwise if you work with the finance team, their ROI will be a cost metric. If you work with a communication team, there will be time saving on what they're doing in designing a format. I think the key indicator to define is what are you doing with the quality time that you're saving as a result of that. All that efficiency and all that time and cost and money that we are saving, what are we deploying it towards as an organization? And I think if we train our teams to work with that, usually the problem from going on something from pilot to scale is that everybody is evaluating that particular thing from their fragmented view. And that all of those fragments are not joining up to say where the bigger picture is. So if we are able to train our teams to go towards that bigger picture, I think that's number one. The second is to say, how are we looking at these costs both in the short frame and the medium frame with people we are serving, as well as what's at risk. And sometimes this could be life saved, right? I mean, in our case, we are working on a program where I think Rahul was talking about dermatology. We are working on a program where we are providing chlorinated water across many, many parts of India. We know that could help over 1 lakh children spend their 5th birthday every single year in our country, right? So therefore, your ROI could come from that, but that ROI isn't going to happen tomorrow. And you've got to work towards it and identify sort of those integrated metrics that are driving you in that direction.
Anurag, your perspective on how you...
One thing that I observed here that we all discussed about saving cost and what it would cost us for an integration and implementation of any AI idea innovation. I would want to highlight that I would want to draw everyone's attention on the hidden cost that it comes. I mentioned regulation and it's evolving. We also spoke about boardrooms, that these decisions are being taken in boardroom. We also spoke about customer experience. But all of this is also adding to a hidden, it's actually taking us to a hidden minefield. I would want to quote from Spider-Man movie, and I would twist it a bit. With great power comes great responsibilities. Similarly, with great technology comes great challenges as well. We all are focused on saving cost and ignoring the hidden cost around it. All of us are innovating, all of us are still trying to figure it out, and the interaction between the developers, the users, and the end users, that has to go through some changes, and there are going to be some confrontation. Some of those confrontation may be limited to an individual consumer at a policy experience. It could be a big client getting their, consignment delivered. It could be any of those experiences which can turn very ugly. And given the fact that there is, though there is guidance, but there is lack of governance, I see that we should also include the hidden cost associated with this new technology and the liabilities that may come to us in the future. And that should be inculcated in our ROI discussions and our boardroom discussions as well.
Yeah. Praveen, your perspective on this?
So your question was, are you taking into account all the costs?
All the costs, like the software, hardware,
Yeah,
deployment.
so look, we've started executing this for a bit now. The results are immediate. So honestly, there isn't a whole lot of calculation we need to do. The introduction of AI immediately brings down cost, immediately helps us in engineering velocity. So I'm able to ship more every quarter. Like there is just no doubt about that. I think the things that you can sometimes miss are when you are running an AI system, you also have a legacy system running. So sometimes there are two systems running at the same time because you haven't come to a point where you can fully rely on the new AI system. And those costs can sometimes be troubling because you are actually running both the things parallelly. So I think I was thinking when I saw your questions is that I don't have a line item of, this in my P&L. And of course, it just sits in engineering costs, in the engineering function. So I think that is one cost which is not often seen. But other than that, honestly, for us, the biggest cost is still software, inference cost. We are a B2C company, so, we just launched, for example, if you want to look for a house and apartment, so we launched a conversational agent on WhatsApp, and we launched it on LLMs. We are going to SLMs now, because LLMs, the variable per query inference cost is climbing because the number of users now coming live is substantial. So we feel that instead of an LLM, we will invest in an SLM for the simple reason that that will be one-time infrastructure cost, but over a period of time, the usage goes up, our per inference cost actually comes down by 30-40%. So we are working with all of this, but for us, big cost is actually is software. There is some hardware, of course, but the biggest cost continues to be software. And I think the benefits are almost immediate for us to see, both on cost and on the top line metrics that we see. So it's there is no question of how quickly we can introduce as many aspects as possible.
Right. In fact, that legacy systems question I'd like to take to Resham also, and then I'll come to you after Rahul. You have a huge legacy system, and then you're also implementing AI parallelly. So the transition cost from legacy to an AI function, some example of how you've seen that play out in your organization.
If I can crack a bad joke, I think we are scared of becoming a legacy company, so that's the starting point which we have to move away from. But look, I think actually thinking what is happening with AI is a boon for us because of the complexity I talked about. We have every application flavor and version that you can think of in the last 100 years that we could, of our last 40 years of technology, right. Everything which we could buy, we have bought. Everything that we could implement, we have. And everything which we could have done badly, we have done that also. So we have a really good set of problems. And with the advent of AI, not that we didn't know of the problems, but we could not solve for it in time. So we were working on modernizing our landscape and cleaning up our data and trying to hook up our systems, but it's not something that we could do in days or hours. So it's just been a journey. With AI and with whatever we are doing right now, what it is doing is giving us a chance to fake it till we make it. So a lot of the data stitching that we talk about, we have a real opportunity when it comes to servicing the customer, where we haven't modernized all these applications, but we can still pull out the necessary information to service the customers. So look, I think for us it's been a absolute boon for one, that reason, and two, I think with the assisted coding and some of the new Claude agents and things we talked about, things which we were talking about in months, now we're talking in minutes. And even if it's half ready and half right, I would take it any day because it's just so much more promising than what we were dealing with. So I think it's been a real uplifter, and from an ROI perspective, it definitely looks way better than if we were to have to do this the way we were doing the transformation and going application by application.
Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier, the impact in a large organization, even a small percentage change is millions. Right. Rahul, I wanted to come to you about the actual human capital that's involved with this whole transition to AI. Right. Earlier, you needed a lot more experienced people because that experience counted when it came to implementing processes in a company or anything, and you work with several different startups. Now, because you have AI, which can do a lot of the mundane functions, we've already seen that happening. The average experience that you need from a person has come down. Is that true? Is this statement true? Like, I can have someone with just 5 years experience perform as well as a person who has 15 years of experience in a certain field?
That's an interesting question, and let me attempt to answer that with 2-3 different perspectives, right? One is people can seem much smarter out of the box because they used AI to come up with the answer, right? So a young intern can give you an answer to a complex question which seems almost right. It may not have any insight, but it reads really well. So that is the one problem with AI, right? It writes it very well structured. The quality of the sentences, the prose is just phenomenal, high clarity, but it may not have any insight because it is just based on public data, it is based on no real human experience. So I think that's the gap, but you have to also look at it the other way around. Actually, when I did my first job, I got the shittiest work that was there in an organization, right? That's what we do. That's how you learn. Your first jobs in your career are going to be the worst jobs you'll ever have. The most boring, mundane work will be shoveled to you. And that's how you learned. That's where you made mistakes, and that's how you learned. How do we learn if all the boring, mundane work moves to AI? So that becomes a different way to look at that question, right? And to my mind, is that the only way to learn is the answer to that. You should think about, we learned that way, doesn't mean that's always the best way to learn. Of course, none of us would want to go back and do any of that, right? So that's that. But also commenting on, you you talked about legacy systems. So actually my career, I've done a lot of technology, and I was Japan, I was dealing with Honda, Toyota and these guys, and they have very, very large legacy systems, right? Like Toyota had this system which had 80 servers just to take in all the car data which comes out of your car, which goes to the mothership, on your performance of your car, what errors happen, everything. All that telemetry goes back. And they used to, when they did a query on that, they firstly had to decide that they will do this query beforehand, then the data was prepared, and then the query was run. And, basically this was 1 month of work to get one report. And we moved them off this legacy system to something which was cutting edge at that time, right? And which was NoSQL based, and you had responses in 5 minutes, right? So you went from 1 month to 5 minutes. And even the project implementation times changed, right? I mean, legacy systems used to take years to implement, which were outdated by the time they actually were delivered. And then you had SaaS systems where, integration efforts, everything dropped to months. But now we're talking, actually you can go do something, see the result, comment whether you like it or not, what are the changes you need. Everything is fundamentally happening in real time. You can have a conversation about an application with the AI and it keeps building it and showing it to you and you iterate over it. So this ability to iterate very, very quickly changes what comes out. See, today change is very expensive. I mean, if you go to any legacy system, change is very expensive. Why? Have you tried in your organization to get something changed in your IT system? Basic answer you've always got is no. Next quarter, next year. That's the answer, right? Why should it be like that? This will change. It will change. That is the opportunity that's happening right now. And the organizations that run towards changing that faster will capitalize, will go ahead, as Perry was talking about, that he's accelerated his time to market, which has accelerated his business. So I think that acceleration is the key piece to look at.
Right. Sachin, I wanted to come to you on, again, in the insurance business. Are you seeing a change in the experience level needed for your manpower, and what is the impact then on your cost?
Well, I think from a manpower perspective, if you look at how we visualize and how we see clearly insurance evolving in the market space is, how do we kind of have this friction-free, frictionless back and forth that we do with the customer at times, So when you talk to a company executive who's wanting to explain a product or probably, go through a financial need assessment, the way we visualize things is that how could we make it more responsive, that you can give end-to-end solution to the customer in that one transaction. See, the thing is that the customer doesn't like the back and forth. Nobody wants to kind of go through one, the understanding on insurance, the second, try to make it a little bit more back and forth, and then 3, try to ask more health-related questions. Selling insurance can get a little bit more overwhelming. Now, the opportunity for the insurers, therefore, is to make things simple. And as I said, the reason why I emphasize on simplicity is because no matter how much you want to kind of do with all the stuff that we just spoke about, if you're not obsessive about simplicity, then you will never be able to amplify or lead with scale. So therefore, what we are doing is to ensure that all the workflows that we have at the so-called back end or the back office are eventually running on the front end. So we want our front ends, our apps, where the customers are directly interfacing and interacting, to have more responsiveness. So some of the things that you typically do at the back end, which means, simple dedupe checks, duplicate checks, or some of the fraud related checks, as you mentioned. If all of those rule engines can power the front end and the customer can get a response of, going through the proposal form and then getting a decision, quicker, then there are chances that you'll be able to expand and have more distribution reach within the country. Now, if you try to make it more back and forth, that's where, the turnaround times are increasing, the cost increases, and every touch at the back end, mind you, is a cost for us. It could be a query that you would do somewhere, or it could be a human touch who's going to review something and then pass it on back to the customer. So we have deployed on the underwriting side, that's where we are extremely proud of, where we were the first ones to kind of come up with a generative AI capability where on the underwriting side, we eventually looked at how our data was behaving to how the standard operating process or the manuals or the policy is for underwriting, and then try to give a score back to the underwriter to say that whether you would want to onboard the life or not. And we tried, and we did run this on a co-pilot model for at least a year to see how the results are. And now working on an autopilot, but still kind of being reviewed by humans, because we believe that, you know, the decision making needs to be still quality checked. So we're not completely on autopilot, but that's a capability that we built, and that's just one use case that we have at the back end. We do have a lot of capabilities where we're kind of coming up with some of the applications which are all being coded by AI. You know, virtually 70 to 75% on some of the new applications that we're developing. Some of the legacy stuff, we find it a little bit more challenging than what it is normally. But for all the new age applications that we're coming up, we're leveraging AI. Test automation, we're leveraging a lot on AI and helping us predict some of the test accuracy. So that's the kind of landscape that we have on AI within the organization, and largely in the insurance space as well.
Okay, and I think we have a full day ahead also. I would love to take this conversation even further, but I mean, the prompter is telling me it's like time's up right now. So I just wanted to thank you all for joining me on this panel. I think some very interesting perspectives, and I hope you all have got some takeaways on how ROI is not just about the money and the cost savings, it's a whole lot of other things. If it's you know, on the human capital, on time saved, on faster decision making, all of that, we've seen perspectives from the panel over here. Thank you so much for those insights. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.